There's a background setting in there that you can put stuff on.
All right. All right. It looks like we are live. And Jason, I think everybody is here. If you want to get started.
Okay, good morning. We have the we have, I think, a minute or so until it's now 10 a.m. Okay, so thank you everyone for being present in video and appreciate your help on the meeting with some of the challenges that are present now. But it is 10 a.m., so we're going to call to order the meeting of GMA2. We have chosen to use this platform because of some of the COVID-19 directives that are in place, both locally and via the governor's emergency orders relating to open meetings. So that's a quick overview. We will go through the agenda as posted to the GMA2.org website, and I will look away periodically because I'm using another PC to the side for the purposes of following the agenda on my own computer to a certain extent. So we'll go ahead and go through the roll call. And I'm going to go through the districts as listed alphabetically in GMA2. So we have first Garza County Underground Water Conservation District. Okay. We have High Plains Underground Water Conservation District. Okay, Ronnie is here. We have Llano Estacado Underground Water Conservation District.
Present.
Mesa Underground Water Conservation District.
Present.
Permian Basin Underground Water Conservation District.
Present.
Sandyland Underground Water Conservation District.
Present.
And then South Plains Underground Water Conservation District.
Present.
Okay, so we do have a quorum. The third item on the agenda is public comment, and there was instruction provided in the posting of the agenda and so forth on providing public comment. And I will check in with Victoria to see if anyone registered in GMA2 to provide public comment at this morning's meeting.
Thank you, Jason. At this time, we do not have anyone providing public comment, but I would ask that we pause this meeting for just 1 second. I think we're having problems with the YouTube live stream. So if y'all will give me just a few minutes. And if we have 4 attendees right now, if any of the attendees would like to provide public comment, please just raise your hand and we will notify you. So if y'all will give me just a second. At this time, I show the YouTube link to be working. For those who have staff members watching, it is delayed about 30 seconds, but I show it to be live. So, and Jason, there is no one raising their hand at this time as well. So if you'd like to continue, I will share the agenda.
Okay, thank you. It does now show in our video attendees list that Kathy Nelson is available. And Kathy, if you're able and can unmute, we did do roll call. Are you present and representing Garza County Water District?
Kathy, I'm going to unmute you. Are you there? Okay, I will step out and give Kathy a call.
Okay. All right. Number four on the agenda is minutes. Minutes of the previous meeting. Carmen distributed to the group as a draft, and so that is an action item for today if you've had opportunity to review them.
I'll make a motion to approve them. Zandberg.
I'll second.
Okay, a motion by Sandyland and second by Permian Basin to approve the minutes of the previous meeting. Any other discussion? If not, those in favor, please unmute and voice aye.
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 Any nays in the motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting? Okay, if not, the minutes are approved. Item number 5, Texas Water Development Board updates. Robert Bradley, thank you for joining us. And
You're welcome.
we'll turn over to you updates that are relevant, and thank you for being here.
Okay, just a few updates. If you're worried about management plan approvals, we have come up with an online approval process for those. So there's no need to worry about that while we're away from the office, because we've been out for quite a while now, and probably won't be back until middle of June or July later. We do have exempt use estimates that will be coming out in June, and we'll send them out to the districts, and we need your comments on them. These are the required numbers we have to send out under Chapter 36, and we need for y'all to look at them and update them and comment on those when they come out in June. And one of the requests we had from our water use folks at the Water Development Board is they're going to start working on the irrigation demands for the next water plan, and they may be wanting either draft or final mags from the GMAs to create those demands a little earlier than you'll actually submit, but we'll send out more information on that later. But I know for GMA2 and GMA1, those are very important to have, those irrigation demands. So just a heads up on that. And that's all I have for today.
Thank you, Robert. I will stay on this agenda item for a moment or two and allow our members, if they would like to pose any questions or clarification to Robert relating to the Texas Water Development Board updates and information that he has just shared. Okay, Robert, I do want to ask for a little clarification for our group on the exempt water use estimates. Are those for a particular year?
They're actually for not, they're also, I'd have to ask John on it, but they're also projections too for the future. These are part of what you'll have to use in the permitting process, the exempt use numbers. So that information will come out when y'all see them.
Thank you. I'm curious, as an example, for some of our areas in GMA2 that have a lot of oil field drilling. You know, Chapter 36 specifies the water use,
What you'll have to use in the
specifies that the water used, groundwater used for the drilling of an oil well does not require a permit. And so depending on which recent year, for instance, may be under consideration, that might vary quite a bit.
You'll see that in the methodology that was used. So, and then make your comments when you get the numbers. So,
Okay. Robert, one other question that I think might also be important for our members. Do you have any other updates relating to the potential budget cuts or reductions that have been in the news recently from the governor, and how that might be affecting the operations in PWDB?
we have no information on that right now. Our management's been saying that we're probably in pretty good shape, but you know, those cuts could happen. But like right now, we don't have that information. So,
Okay, thank you very much. One last opportunity, if anyone would like to ask of Robert anything else that hasn't been covered, maybe needs clarification, just unmute, and I'll give everyone a moment to do.
I have a quick question. We have a lot of growers that have come in and got permits for the oil company because they're going to turn them into an irrigation water well after the oil companies have gotten through with them. How do we, and I don't know that we've not clearly marked that that's what it was originally taken out for. How are we going to do that on the exempt use? How do you figure that out?
well, could you repeat that? Because I think I had a hiccup through my VPN just now, and I didn't get the first part of the question.
Well, instead of the oil companies coming in and telling us that they're going to drill a well for their rig, the grower will come in and get the permit because the oil company, it's part of their bargaining part that they will drill the water well and give it to the farmer afterwards. So it's turned into an irrigation well. How do we justify that? Or
That's going to have to be a district decision and search on that. So we are only tasked with doing the Chapter 36 in the exemptions in the rules. So any variation of that, a district would have to look at that. So,
okay, all right, thank you.
yeah.
Okay, thank you, Robert. Appreciate your updates. I would like to proceed to agenda item number 6. And
I'm sorry. At this time, can the meeting minutes reflect that Kathy Nelson, Dickie Wallace and John Boren, all from Garza County, are present. They are having microphone issues. So I have a chat conversation going with them, and Miss Nelson can also chat to all panelists. They voted to approve the minutes as well. So if the meeting minutes will reflect that in their presence.
okay, thank you. Okay, under agenda item number 6, we have several points, and I think the first several of these for this discussion are to be introduced by and led by Dr. Hutchison, who is engaged to help our member districts through this round of planning. And so I would like to turn over the discussion and all to Bill. And thank you, Bill, for indulging us in this different approach to a meeting, but the floor is yours.
Thank you. Is there any way to turn control of it over so I can just put my PowerPoint up?
Can you see, am I sharing the PowerPoint? Can you see it?
Yeah, it says that you're sharing it, and I think, isn't there a way for you to turn it over to me?
One moment, let me see. Okay, can you try and share from your screen now?
Now I can, yes.
There you go.
Can you see that?
I cannot.
Oh, wait, I have to hit share. Details. How's that?
I can see it.
Okay. Ah. Okay. So this PowerPoint is kind of covers all the different agenda item areas. So we'll go through an overview of the joint planning process, including the schedule. And then there's several areas we're going to cover. Then I'll start going through the documentation for the not relevant aquifers, and then update on the GAM simulation to comply with the Water Development Board's request to run things out through 2080, and then review the draft explanatory report. So one thing to keep in mind is what we're doing here in joint planning is a planning effort. That results in the desired future conditions in the model available groundwater. That flows into the various management processes, and that's embodied within your district's management plan. And one of the goals that's required in the management plan is goal 8, where you have to address in a quantitative manner the DFC in the district. That in turn is distinct from regulation, which is embodied within your rules. And that kind of gets into permitting, well spacing, those sorts of things. So keep in mind that this is a planning process. It's not a regulatory process. And sometimes that gets mixed up and confused. Prior to 2005, regional planning groups set a number called groundwater availability, and there was no standard approach. And there's a lot of cases where the groundwater availability that was set by the regional planning groups really wasn't consistent with the stated goals. And some of the methods, and I admit I was part of this in Region E, we just kind of made up stuff as we went along in areas where we didn't have much data. And most importantly, there was no formal mechanism where neighboring GCDs really knew about what each other were doing, and that could create some interdistrict problems because impacts were crossing county lines or district lines. So in 2005, the legislature set up a mandatory joint planning process among GCDs within groundwater management areas. And so that basically required a consistent approach, or at least an approach that was known throughout the GMA. And so it was really a formal process to incorporate data and models into the planning decisions. And that's how the available groundwater numbers in the regional plans are now being set. So in 2005, there was something called a desired future condition in the statute, but it wasn't defined. So the Water Development Board added a definition into their administrative rules. And it's a quantified condition of groundwater at a specified time or times in the future. And it's really a policy goal. And it can be expressed either as drawdown or spring flow, storage volumes. There's a variety of ways it can be done. There was no set way. And they're updated basically every 5 years. Now, the model available groundwater, as we now know it, is the amount of pumping necessary to achieve the desired future condition. Now, where the GMA, the districts within the GMA develop the DFC, the Water Development Board is responsible for calculating the MAG, or the model available groundwater, based on model simulations or water budget calculations. In a couple cases, a bit on district provided data and information. The MAG number is included in the GCD management plans. It's one of your permitting factors. But like I was saying, it becomes the groundwater availability number for regional water plans. So we can see that the groundwater availability is really a combination of the DFC and the MAG, which kind of means the groundwater availability is a blend of policy and science. So again, even though the DFC is a policy goal, it has to be quantified, and that has now been included in there's a statutory definition of that now, which they just took the Water Development Board's administrative rule language. That's covered here in this slide. Now, the groundwater availability models are an important part of all this. This is a program that started in 1999 or 2000 to model all the aquifers in Texas. And there's a stakeholder involvement process. It's continuously improving the models is a big part of it. And the objective of the models is to define groundwater availability. And originally that meant it was in support of groundwater district management plans and regional water planning group plans. Now, a lot of these GAMs were developed before 2005, which was before joint planning even started. So the model when you run a model, you're simulating changes in groundwater pumping and or recharge or drought conditions. And what you get out of the model run are things like drawdown, spring flows, and storage volumes. Well, these are the kinds of things that DFCs are made up of. And these are the things that are interesting for calculating the MAG. So this provides some idea of how we're using the models to look at DFCs and look at MAGs in an integrated way. So what we want to make sure is that when we're developing DFCs, we want to be able to use the model. They're important because the board is going to use these models to calculate the MAG. Data are important because we know the models there's some uncertainty in them and they can't provide all the answers, and they certainly cannot make decisions. And because the DFCs are essentially a policy statement, there has to be some practicality or some common sense in all this. Now, the DFC process was modified in 2011 based on some bills that came out of the legislature. And this changed the process where now districts have to consider 9 specific factors. They have to actually propose a DFC and then go through a period of public hearings and public comment. Then each district writes a summary report summarizing all the comments they received. Then the districts gather again at the GMA to adopt a final DFC. And one of the key things is this explanatory report, which documents what was done, how things went, talking about the 9 specific factors and so on. Now the factors, we've reviewed these before: aquifer uses and conditions, state water plan strategies, hydrologic conditions, including the recoverable storage and groundwater budget issues, other environmental impacts, subsidence, socioeconomic impacts, private property impacts, feasibility of achieving the DFC, and any other relevant information. Plus, there's a balancing test where you have to balance between the highest practicable level of production and the conservation, preservation, protection, recharging, and prevention of waste, and the control of subsidence. So we've got 9 factors in this balancing test that have to go into this. And this is the process that we used back in 2015 and 2016 when the second round was being completed. There hasn't been any changes since then. So the statute requires that these 9 factors in the balancing be considered prior to voting on a proposed DFC. That is, before any formal public hearings or public comment. But the final explanatory report isn't really required until this is all done. So what I've been doing is preparing preliminary explanatory reports as part of the adoption of the proposed DFC to kind of facilitate the public hearing process and giving some context to everything. Now the new process has these elements, but now we have the third round, so we have new timelines, new deadlines. The proposed DFC has to be adopted or voted on before May 1st of 21. So we've got about 11 months before that deadline. That's a statutory deadline. So before that, we have to consider the 9 factors and vote on a proposed DFC. After the vote on the proposed DFC, that's when you have the public comments, public hearings, write the district summary report, vote on the final DFC, and finalize the explanatory report, and then send everything into the board by January 5th, 2022. That's a new deadline that was put into the administrative rules of the board. And like I said, what we're doing, one of the things I've been doing with the GMAs I've been working with is preparing draft explanatory reports to facilitate the public comment and public hearing process. So again, to reiterate, it's useful for the public hearings. We can document the factor consideration and the GAM runs, and include technical memoranda on the runs as appendices. So now let's go through the aquifers that we're dealing with in GMA2, and this is sort of focused on how things went through the second round. So based on the results of the second round of joint planning, we have 3 relevant aquifers: the Ogallala, the Edwards Trinity High Plains, which is the way we've been doing it is combining those two and the DACA. The Edwards Trinity Plateau and the Pecos Valley, although they exist in small areas of GMA2, they're considered not relevant for purposes of joint planning. Now in round 2, we documented all these, the relevant aquifers and the non-relevant aquifers in a series of explanatory reports and tech memoranda. They're all dated November 1st, 2016. And so for the relevant aquifers, we have an explanatory report. We had preliminary runs of the model. There's 3 of those, one for the Ogallala, one for the High Plains, and one for the Dockham. And then a final model run, which we called Scenario 16. That was in Tech Memo 1601. The aquifers that were not relevant for purposes of joint planning, we had, based on guidance from the Water Development Board, we have separate documentation covering the required items for each of the 2 aquifers. So what we've been doing in round 3, based on a scope of work I prepared on October 21st last year, we expected no changes to the DFC, but round 2 only extended out to 2070. And then the Water Development Board is now requiring that round 3 DFCs extend out to 2080 to facilitate the regional planning process. Now, in a lot of areas, this isn't as big a deal as it is in GMA2, because the model runs basically are tracking the reduction in pumping as a result of decreasing saturated thickness. So that meant I had to rerun the model using exactly the runs that we have been running before, just extending it out an additional 10 years. And that's to facilitate the MAG calculation. So what I'd like to do today is review the documentation for the not relevant aquifers, then review the GAM simulation, and then review the updated draft of the explanatory report. Now, after this one, I think we might want to take a pause and discuss it a little bit, because I'm just sort of throwing this out as a way to move forward to meet our deadline. And it's a little bit accelerated. Some of this has to do with, when we got together at the TAG meeting in January, we sort of laid out a schedule, and a lot of it depended on how, or revolved around my involvement with the Texas New Mexico litigation. Well, along with everything else that got disrupted as a result of all this pandemic stuff. So this schedule fits in well with my Texas New Mexico stuff as best as I understand it today. But it's certainly worthy of some discussion depending on what y'all needs are. So I've prepared a bunch of materials and sent them out, some draft reports. And I think you can basically take the next few months and kind of go through them. No, I don't think there's any real hurry. But if I can receive comments by mid-September, then I can incorporate whatever comments I get and reissue the draft documents by October 1st and a draft resolution for the proposed DFC by October 1st. Then we can get together again in mid-October. And assuming that the proposed DFCs are adopted or approved on that at that meeting, that would begin the 90-day public comment period. And that would mean that the public comment period would end in mid-January of 21. If we can get the district summer reports back by early February, we could meet again in mid-February to vote on the final DFCs. Now, this is quite a bit ahead of the May 1st deadline, but my schedule with the litigation is if the longer we wait, the harder it's going to be for me. The trial is supposed to start in the spring of 21 now. So if we can do that and meet and vote in mid-February, then I can get all the materials together to the board by March 1st, and we're done. Now, once this is done, then there's another step after the board makes its administrative complete review, completeness review. Then each board has to adopt the final DFCs, but we can worry about that at that time. So if anybody's got some comments or want to discuss that item or the schedule, this would be a good time to do it.
I'm good with the schedule. I don't think there's any reason to delay it if you need to get done by the spring.
Bill, it looks good to us. Whatever we can do to kind of help you and your schedule out too, we can get it done.
Appreciate that.
Looks good to me.
It looks good to me as well.
Looks good to us here, Bill. Thanks for all your hard work on that.
No problem. Is that everybody?
Any other feedback for Bill at this point in time?
Garza County says it looks good to them as well.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay. So moving on. Now the documentation for the not relevant aquifers, I sent over 2 tech memos, one for the Edwards Trinity Plateau and one for the Pecos Valley Aquifer. I added some language that basically says these are the same as the 2016 documents. So take a look at those. If you see anything that needs to be modified or added or taken out, these were approved last time, so I don't think there's not much going on. Oh, I did see, I didn't catch that one, 1602. I'll fix that. Okay, the meat of this thing was the updated GAM simulation through 2080. So in 2016, scenario 16 was in Tech Memo 1601. Now, if you remember, the calibration period for the model was 1929 to 2012. And so our simulation period was 2013 to 2070. Now, as I mentioned, the board is going to calculate the MAG through 2080. And the GMAs certainly, have the option of updating the simulations and then adopt a DFC through 2080 as part of the third round. So I've updated the model files to run through 2080. And remember, what we're putting in the model is essentially a pumping, for lack of a better term, a pumping request. And then as the saturated thickness declines, that pumping gets reduced. That was a key feature of this new model that we talked extensively about last time. And so the key here was to figure out how much the pumping will continue to reduce from 2071 to 2080. So I updated the post processors, and I also, if you, as you may recall, we received a comment letter from the Water Development Board from the last round to clarify a few issues relating to pass-through cells and the Pecos Valley alluvium and the DACA being outside areas of the official boundary, which means it was in the brackish areas. So I've updated all that. Now I want to update this tech memo, but I want to get the information over to the board to make sure they confirm or agree with the approach I've taken, so we kind of short circuit any further review. So I'll be putting probably in the next week or so, pending your approval of this approach, I'll wrap that up and get that over to them. And it's sort of like a pre-review, like for your management plan. It's that kind of review I'm seeking from the board. So these are the new numbers on a county by county basis. This is kind of like the old table 2 from the old tech memo, where I list out each county, the decadal pumping and the decadal drawdown. And you'll notice here that if you recall last time, across the top, it went from 2020 to 2070. But now we're extending this thing out to 2080, and we're already in 2020, so it seems silly to set a DFC for this current year. So I've simply substituted it for 2030 through 2080 for each of these. And you'll notice that, like I had been mentioning, how the pumping numbers reduce by decade as a result of increasing drawdown. Same kind of table, but this time for the DOCM. And these have all been included in your packets, not only in terms of the PowerPoint, but also in the, I reproduced these tables also. Not only do I break it down by county, I also break it down by district within GMA2. So again, here are the districts, and then there's also a final summary of GMA2 as a whole. And these are the GMA2 numbers, the ones we used in the actual adoption of the DFC, if you recall. That's for the Edwards, the Ogallala, the Edwards Trinity High Plains. And then for the DACA. And then finally, the explanatory report was updated. So I took the 2016 document and basically just updated it. So I changed the dates, changed the tables, changed the, the numbers as appropriate. There's a section in there of where I discussed the 2010 DFCs, and what was the 2016 DFCs now is still maintained as a discussion item, since we're simply updating that. And now I add a new section that covers these what will be the 2021 DFCs. Obviously, the dates of the public meetings and all those sorts of things are not in there. And obviously the public comments and district summary reports, there's a placeholder for that. So I've included the two appendices. The Appendix A is the resolution, so obviously that's not there. But the other appendices are there. So take a look at this and get any comments you have back to me. And I'm open and available for any questions y'all might have.
Mr. Hutchison, I have a question. This is Donna. Could we include the Howard County slides that were used as examples in your PowerPoint from the March 10, 2016, along with the one at Appendix B in the new explanatory report?
You want to see that?
No, sir. Could we include those in the explanatory, the current one or the draft that you have? The examples that were used, because there were several different slides that were used showing the difficulty in the modeling.
Yeah, Bill, I think there were some hydrographs that Don is referencing in the
Yes, sir.
explanatory report, which showed some of the inconsistencies the model had.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I did in the, let me pull that up. talking about these guys. So are those the ones you're talking about, Donna?
My screen is black. It's not showing anything yet. Maybe it hasn't caught up.
Okay. There were several the problem children for Howard County were included in the tech memo, in tech memo 1601, as you mentioned.
Yes.
And they'll be in the new, I can put them either in the new tech memo or I can elevate them into the explanatory report at your, that's your call.
Okay. Yeah, the explanatory report, I think that's something that really, those modeling issues with that Howard County just really needs to be addressed.
Yeah, and as we've talked about, the real problem, I don't know if you can see the screen yet.
No, I just see you.
Okay. Somehow, oops.
Bill, if you'll just reshare, I had to restart it.
Oh, okay.
I got an error on my side.
Okay, I got you.
There you go. I see models. Donna, do you see the models?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, you see this? Okay, this is largely a problem with the recharge in the model. And I've got how the storage change was affected, and in both the DOCM and the Ogallala. So, and this was all part of the tech memo. So I can certainly add these items and into the explanatory, but I'll just, duplicate them there. That's not a problem. I was playing around with that because if you recall, I think Amy's on the call. She and I had quite a back and forth early on this thing as to whether y'all wanted an additional model run to kind of address this. And then I guess at the October meeting, you decided not to do that. So in anticipation of that, I already started playing around with essentially a sensitivity analysis of the recharge and how that affected Howard County. And so maybe I can talk to you offline or Amy offline, and maybe I can beef that section up a little bit to kind of drive home some of these points. Oops, went the wrong way. Some of these points, as to what this really means and how the recharge conceptualization has really kind of created a problem.
I think offline would be great with Amy and I.
Okay. We've
Yes,
got
sir.
plenty of time. We've got plenty of time to do that, but that's a good suggestion and a good comment for how to deal with this.
I would appreciate it very much.
No problem.
Bill, can I ask if you can explain, and I probably should know this answer, why Llano, Mesa, Sandyland, and South Plains have no DOCM pumping? I know it has to do with historical use, but even in the future, it's 0.
You're talking about this one here?
Yes, sir.
Llano, Sandyland. Okay, so the answer to that is in here. Let me zoom this out a little bit. Here's how scenario 16 was put together in terms of the DOCM. So you can see that there just wasn't any pumping historically. So to the extent that y'all want to add pumping, you'll notice that, like in some of these, I had to bump it up. A lot of this was working with Jason last time. And sometimes it was just making up, new locations of pumping, as you can see. But if y'all have, given where things are now, I mean, this was, 4 or 5 years ago. So if
Right.
things have changed and you have areas of your districts where you think Dockum pumping may occur in the future, this would be the time to, at least even if it was just a county map and you put a dot on it, you know,
Okay.
and send it to me, I can get that incorporated in so that there is some pumping into the future for your needs, or, you know, it's a planning process. So this would be the time to do that.
Okay.
But yeah, the table in the tech memo is how it documents how I use the initial pumping for the Ogallala, the High Plains, and for the Dockum. And so to the extent that you want to update that, just send it on over.
Okay. I mean, that's something we should do if we have pumping, correct?
Yeah. Well, yeah, if you're permitting it, if you're managing it, absolutely. And like I said, the way to do that is give me a map of the district and put some dots on it where the wells are and how much is currently being pumped. And then we can go from there.
Okay. I think there gets to be confusion just in conversation, but since I think the first round of planning, we said that the Dockum was not relevant, and that we are saying it's relevant even though there's zero pumping, correct? Because
Well, that's another way to go. That you are certainly capable of saying that it's not relevant for purposes of joint planning, which then gives you freedom to do, you know, what you want. It's simply acknowledging the fact that whatever pumping is going on in the Dockum in your district, it doesn't affect the neighboring district.
right.
And if everybody agrees to that. So
Okay.
I don't remember, where's that?
We just did it GMA wide. There wasn't a non-relevant for the Dockum.
Correct.
I just
Yeah, it's right here. Yeah. We didn't opt to do that, but I've worked, some of the GMAs I work in, they will actually have it relevant in some counties or some districts and not relevant in others.
Right.
And so that's certainly another path you can take if you're not. One of the things that you've got to recognize that if you set a DFC, then you got to monitor it, because there is some proposed legislation now that will formalize how you track that and include that as a new part of the explanatory report.
Right.
If you call it not relevant, then there's no DFC. There's, you know, you still may monitor it. You can still manage it. You can still permit it, but it takes it out of this forum because you've recognized that whatever's going on doesn't affect your neighbors.
Okay.
And that's kind of the basis of the vote or the evaluation of it in my mind.
That makes sense. I had a driller tell me I said it wasn't relevant, so I didn't have any jurisdiction. So I was.
No, that's not true. That's
definitely
not true.
Corrected him really fast, but just
Yeah.
wanted to make sure that.
And that's one of the big problems, is that folks have taken this DFC stuff, and when they hear, well, it's not relevant, that means you're not regulating it. No, this is not a regulatory process. This is a planning process. And there's a number of instances where, well, I know in GMA7, the Lipan Kickapoo, you know, the whole aquifer is covered by one district. So they're already managing it, but it doesn't have anything to do with any surrounding areas. Oh, it looks like Amy wants to say something.
Amy, I'll message you. Give me 1 second.
Okay, thank you, Bill. So input from various districts in this review. period leading up till September, addressing the items like Donna has mentioned and Amber has, would be submitted. And do you all or Bill have a preference in the submission of that content? Bill, would you like for folks to submit that individually in some respect, or would you like for me to somehow gather them and compile them, or what would be your instructions on that front?
Well, I just, that's a lot of work for you. I mean, I don't mind getting one-on-one comments back in whatever format. You know, some people go through and want to mark it up. Others may just want to put a couple of paragraphs together and, you know, send me some comments. So, I mean, it isn't all that much extra work to deal with it one-on-one. It's a lot of extra work for you to compile them. So.
Okay. So individual district feedback on those attachments, and some things that maybe aren't an attachment yet, but like Amber's brought up an important point, should be submitted to Bill by email. And I think everyone has his contact info. So thank you, Bill.
You bet. I think Amy had sent a chat thing saying, asking if we were going to have any comment or public comment, or was she going to get a chance to ask a question?
Okay.
Is there a way to unmute her?
We had.
I'm gonna, Mr. Hutchison, I'm gonna move you back to a panelist, and I will. Jason, are we gonna allow public comment on this agenda item now?
Okay. Yeah, we can. So everyone's, I guess, learning the functionality of a video platform like this. So, but yeah, we can. I just want to make sure that folks know that we had public comment item 3. So we didn't skip it per se in any respect, but yeah, we can have a comment. So is there,
Amy, at this time you should be able to unmute. Amy, you're unmuted.
Great. I just had a quick question about the modeling is extended to 2080. Does that mean we're extending the DFCs to 2080 and they'll change to those updated numbers?
Right. The DFC that was adopted last time was through 2070. And the board gave us the option of adopting a 2070 DFC, and then they would calculate the 2080 MAG. Or we could rerun the model and then adopt a 2080 DFC and have the MAG already ready to go for 2080. So it's really up to the districts of GMA2 on how they want to do it. But it would make sense to adopt a DFC through 2080, and then we already know what the MAGs are supposed to be through 2080.
Okay, that made sense to me also. I just wanted to make sure that that was kind of the trajectory we were on. Thanks.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and again, that was because of the somewhat unique nature of the Ogallala, because of the declining saturated thickness and therefore the declining pumping rates. It isn't like in some areas where the pumping in 2070 and the pumping in 2080 are the same, like in the Carrizo. So it basically meant it was a good idea to rerun the model or extend it out 10 years.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Do any of the other members have any final, I guess, questions or follow-up? Thank you, Bill. I appreciate the calendar, the schedule, if you will, and all. And all that content isn't going away. Everyone should have it, or if you don't, then get with Carmen. I would say would be the first place to follow up and get that, so you're all aware of the dates and associated kind of checkpoints that we're looking at from here forward. Okay, members, I think we're ready to proceed to the next point under agenda item 6. This stems from the last meeting, some discussion of the administration of this process, and there was, I think, a volunteer by request from Amber and Victoria to look at a way for us to be pretty straightforward and transparent with how this process is being administered. And so, Amber, Victoria, do you either or both have some summary or overview of this document before the group today?
I'm happy to provide a walkthrough. Amber, how would you like to proceed? What do you?
No, you did it. That's good. I just get it. This is all you.
Okay, so just a couple reminders as to the reasoning why we had talked about this. While the groundwater management area is subject to Texas Open Meetings Act and public information records, there's the GMA itself is not a government entity. We as government entities in our own capacity are responsible for the transparency of the GMA. This involves housing of documents, public notice. It involves public records. So if I make a public records request to Permian, does Permian have these things available, or can we better manage in certain manners? So the thought is High Plains Water District already administers this process. So maybe we can have a more formal procedure to point to when people ask for public records or public information. And when it comes to the participation of the public in the GMA meetings. So you don't always think about these things until you need them, until you have a large group of people banging down the door wanting answers on the DFC. So having a interlocal agreement together is a way that we can administer this process in an efficient manner and providing us kind of backbone and information for the public and how we are going to handle our meetings, how we are going to provide public comment. So the kind of bigger overview of this, obviously the groundwater districts are the GMA members. What this proposes is the board president or the board of the GMA is the voting member for the GMA. Voting members need to have, if it's an appointed member, the GCD needs to appoint that through a formal process. So have a resolution at your local GCD saying Jason Coleman has the authority to vote for our GCD in the GMA process. This is our alternate as well. So that when Jason administers the GMA process and asks for votes, he's asking for votes for somebody who has the actual authority to vote on behalf of that groundwater district. A lot of this too, we implemented what's already in existence, having a GMA administrator, the ability for us to also appoint a GMA information officer, and then have a TWDB board representative as part of this process. Meetings, this is in compliance with Chapter 36 with our frequencies, but providing notice on how we're going to post, operating a GMA website We've been talking on the tagged level about notice of GMA meetings and how we're getting the information out there. I think having the website helps us out a lot, but also you guys being able to link to that. Providing a structure for the meetings. So the chairman or administrator, if appointed, does the meetings. We have a secretary. We provide for public comment. So having a structure to say, this is when we're going to take public comment. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes. That's just kind of a standard time frame. And asking that people providing public comment only address agenda items. Again, it seems like a bigger structure, but you open yourself up to liability when you don't have the structure in place. So if we operate one meeting where we let someone provide public comment randomly, or we allow an interchange between the public and the GMA members, and then you don't subsequently at a next meeting, that could present issues for us when it comes to our processes. And the more you have a structure in place and you follow the structure, the better justification you have that you're following your procedures and you're complying with the law. Allows subcommittees. I had 2 comments in here for discussion. Voting thresholds. So while Chapter 36 has a voting threshold for approving the DFC, we also vote on other things such as hiring people or voting on finances and things like that. And so under Section 5, you'll see kind of the consideration of, do we want 2/3 or a majority when we're making decisions on the GMA level? And then also kind of financial management. Some other GMAs have kind of experienced this a little bit, but what happens if someone does not pay? What happens in those types of situations? Because the GMA is not an entity, should we have a non-payment type of agreement? Like what happens if High Plains decides to not pay their bill? If the GMA is in contract with somebody, how does that end up pushing liability to other people? And then also public access and records. So choosing to keep all records, the GMA official records in one spot, and districts can then subsequently say, please visit this website. This is where you can find these records. Or Victoria Whitehead is the information officer for the GMA. She has those things. Now that doesn't usurp your local requirement. For example, if Amber is emailing Donna about the GMA and you get a public records request, I wouldn't be the information officer for something like that. So I believe that's it. So kind of how this looks is there's obviously things in here that we need to discuss. You know, if you like it, if you have suggested changes or edits, but theoretically it's an interlocal agreement. So this agreement would go back to each of your boards, who would have it as an agenda item to vote to approve this interlocal agreement. You can, in the same resolution, go ahead and appoint who your representatives are, and things like that. But there's a signature page. So we would just gather the signatures from each of the districts and then have it. So I am happy to answer any questions y'all may have and open the floor for discussion on kind of some of the questions to be presented.
Victoria, I know that several of the water districts use Ray and Amy on a lot of different avenues. So I don't like them being part of the public because there are times that they have questions that I hadn't thought of. And I need their eyes and ears on things to help me out with what we do. So is there any way we can have Ray and Amy not public comment? Or maybe say our geologists that work for us?
So you have the ability to add people. You have that ability. I would just say there was a discussion about this. It's been discussed at the legislature a couple of times of who has a seat when it comes to a groundwater district or a GMA meeting, GMA procedures. And so there was a bill 2 sessions ago that would add a hydrologist, someone from ag, and it ended up turning the GMA into like a regional water planning group type process. But I mean, Jason, thoughts?
Right, so I guess I understand everything you've said, Lori. I don't know the answer to the question of, let's say, that we have several members from the public attend a meeting. I don't know how you differentiate the two. So if they say, well, I see the person sitting beside me interjecting and adding comments on this agenda item, and they raise their hand and say, well, I've got something I want to say too. I'm not sure what the differentiation, I'm not sure what the process is, or if you don't want any differentiation, then it would just be at any point during the meeting, anyone sitting, let's say in the audience, would just raise their hand and say, I want to talk about whatever, because you want to afford all public members, that is on all non-voting members, the same opportunity. So if you say anyone that's in the public could, let's say, raise their hand at any point in time and say, I want to talk about this and give you my opinion, then by all means, we need to afford them that if we're doing it. So if you're comfortable with that, then it would just be anybody in the audience could say,
But
I
those
want my
people in
turn.
the audience aren't always representing. For example, Ray and Amy are representing my district. And so, but Joe that comes to the board meeting or that comes to the meeting, he's just there to see what's going on. He's not representing my district. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand it for sure. I guess my question is, what does representing mean? Do you want them to vote when you say representing, then, or what?
No, I'm not asking for them to be voting members. I'm just asking, they might think of a different question to ask than what I would. I mean, I don't want to be distracted the whole time texting back and forth.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense what I'm saying? If they have a question that comes to their mind that I hadn't thought of.
Yeah, I could offer some perspective on this just from working with different GMAs. Every GMA does things a little differently. And there are some that are very informal, where everybody basically can speak. Any member of the public basically can speak pretty much at any time. The other extreme is something where it's very rigid. It's almost like a county commissioners meeting, where it's very controlled. There are some where it's a little bit of a hybrid, where for example, if Lori was listening to something that I was talking about and Amy and Ray kind of get her eye, Lori had, in this instance, Lori could essentially recognize Ray or Amy to ask a question. Basically just an extension of a what you call a panelist in this forum. So, I mean, each GMA pretty much has its own ways of doing things. And, there's ways to get, I understand what Lori is saying, because there's a lot of times when we've done this in the past meetings where Ray or Amy and I start having a question and answer session to clarify something that's going on with one of the model runs.
So I would just clarify, under these rules, a GCD is not prohibited from asking someone a question. There's a difference in Lori asking someone advising her a question versus someone raising their hand to provide their input.
Right.
So
Like,
during the meeting, I could just turn to Ray or Amy and I could say, what do you think of this?
Exactly.
Yes, under these,
Acknowledge them that way.
doesn't prohibit that. It's a question of when we allow people to talk who are not participants, like theoretically, the representative from each groundwater district is the participant in this government body. So like theoretically, I shouldn't be talking. I mean, I'm not a participant, I'm a guest, but like I couldn't during Mr. Hutchison's presentation raise my hand and ask questions because I'm not a member of the body. So, but there's a difference in Jason calling on me to provide information on this as a resource for the GMA versus me saying, coming and putting my input there.
Okay.
So what I've heard is, let's say that we're reviewing a certain part of the explanatory report, and let's say Permian Basin had a person very much engaged in the oil field, and they wanted that person to, let's say, provide some feedback on a particular groundwater issue that's very prevalent in the oil field. Then if that person attended a meeting, they could say, we have been visiting with such and such person or firm on trends in this industry, and I would like to maybe invite their thoughts on a particular issue. So under that guise of the invitation, so to speak, in that agenda item and on that issue, then that's permissible. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, sir. It's you asking a resource versus somebody providing input unasked.
Okay. Does that clear it up, Lori?
Lori, I've got you on mute. Do you want me to unmute you?
I got it. Yeah, that'll work. That helps. Thank you.
Before you end this, when I saw this, if you remember last time we did this, I would usually end my presentation with kind of a breakdown of the budget and the split, just to be clear before I send invoices out. But when I saw this, I held off, and I wanted to ask a question if this interlocal agreement was changing the way that I've been invoicing. As you recall, what I've been doing is y'all gave me a table with a percentage split for each of the districts that I invoice. And when you get down to the bottom of this thing, it's a little unclear as to whether that process is going to be the same or it's going to be different. And that was my only, it was more of a question, and that you may want to clarify that, since this is the interlocal and you talk about stuff about money at the end of this.
No, nothing's been executed yet, Bill. And so until, let's say, this is executed, nothing has changed. So, and I don't know, the group will have to decide today, and I guess in the days following, about having their district board act on this. But one final word that I think is a good illustration in response to Lori's issue, which is a good one, and I'm sure many districts across the state have the same type of scenario where they're engaged with a particular company or whatever. But if I'm a person in the audience and I'm observing people just, let's say, interjecting comments without request, then their expectation is, well, I can just interject comments without request also, which would be the natural response, I would think. So I think, again, that request for feedback, like, hey, Sally, you're working with the district on an economic study or something. Can you please help me recall what is important on this issue, versus Sally just from the audience saying, well, y'all got to keep in mind that such and such is happening. And if someone else is sitting next to them, then they think it's just kind of open for all comments at any point in the meeting.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
I wonder if it would be better to do something about this payment issue now. I think it would be better than as an afterthought. If we've somewhat agreed, could we further agree that on the next agenda for the various entities that they have that agreement ratified by their board and kind of put this issue to rest in advance?
Are we talking about the payment or this interlocal agreement?
The payment.
So
my recollection, Ronnie, is that the cost allocation that was adopted sometime back has not been amended, and so it's still in force.
Okay.
Now, unless the members want to revisit the allocation, but if not, what was previously agreed upon is still in effect.
Well, I would rather, we have that settled in advance as opposed to an afterthought. As long as we, what you've said is accurate and agreed to, I feel comfortable with it.
So does anyone have any other feedback here? I know that we can look in the minutes of a previous meeting and might see if Carmen or Victoria can look into that where we had the vote for the cost allocation that's still in effect. There was no expiration in my memory, Ronnie, to the previous allocation of cost. Amber, do you, by chance, do you know from memory there was or was not a specific time frame adopted for our distribution of cost associated with consulting?
No, I don't think there was. I mean,
Well, to the point, you approved my scope of work at the last meeting. And one of the items in the scope of work says, as I did in 2015 and 2016, I'm assuming that I will invoice each district individually based on a cost sharing schedule that will be provided to me. And when I followed up with you after it was approved, Jason, you told me that it was going to be the same. So that's what I'm going to send out invoices later this week.
Mr. Hutchison, the
Yeah.
GMA is not an entity that can accept money. We don't have a bank account. So what the language within here is not completed because it was up for discussion. But basically what the financial provisions as what y'all need to discuss, the GMA districts, is Mr. Hutchison, for example, enters into a contract to do work for GMA2, but he is entering into and invoicing individual districts. But say district XYZ doesn't pay his bill, doesn't pay their bill. How do you then as a GMA handle that? So does he then come and say, okay, well, y'all all need to split the cost of this district who hasn't paid their bill? Or that's what, and again, the language isn't finished here. It was just the question of how do you, because you don't have a GMA2 bank account and you're entering into contracts with other entities, how do you administer and provide for that liability?
Okay. Is there any other discussion or question for Amber or Victoria on interlocal agreement?
Hey, Jason, I have a quick question if I can, sir.
Fire away.
Victoria, you had mentioned just a while ago that you were probably recommending a resolution from our board as an appointment of a designee if the board president couldn't be here. Would the board minutes not suffice if we were able to do that during the board meeting? Why the need for a resolution?
Either is fine. My legal preference is having a resolution so that you just have a single document that says we direct this person. But I believe this document says resolution, turning in resolution or meeting minutes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, on voting members, D, it says they may elect a chair. I know this all is may, but it says they may elect a chairman to preside over the meetings. And then we have a GMA administrator that does the same function. Is that necessary to be repeated in there?
It provides for a process if you choose to not have an administrator, but like you choose to just have a president of the GMA. So it's kind of double just to help if you want to have a secretary run it versus the president versus appointing an administrator. Because for example, Ronnie is our GMA representative for High Plains. Jason is operating as another person as the administrator. Jason does not have a vote.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the group could, Amber, elect you to serve as the president, and I would be out of a job.
Well, I'm good with
which would be great. Which would be great.
I would like to see the font a little bit bigger on this whole agreement. Victoria, I had to squint pretty hard and I even had my contacts in.
Yes, ma'am, I can do that.
Okay, just because It's been a significant part of this discussion. I want to add one more thing. So in response to a good point that Bill made and that Ronnie and some others have made, the group adopted a cost allocation procedure some years back now that was effective in our payments to Bill for the last round of planning. And to my knowledge, there was no expiration to that cost distribution model. And so in response to his statement of our exchange earlier, when I stated there it was the same, it's because no change has been adopted to that cost model. Now y'all make those decisions. And so if you want to make a change to the cost model, then it needs to be addressed. But otherwise, there has been no expiration to that. And so it's still in effect.
That allocation looks good to me. I think it'd be okay to keep. Was it based on budget or was it based on land or acreage? I cannot remember, but either way, I think we've all either gone up or down at the same rate.
Can we let the minutes reflect that today?
You want a motion that says to keep the same allocation, percentage allocation as the previous round of joint planning, and I have that in front of me.
Either that or just recognize in the minutes that we're still under the same percentages.
Yeah, I think Carmen will note that. Okay.
And besides that, would Bill not have recourse to each individual district?
That's my understanding, the way we've done this.
Okay.
He would, the financial procedure would just say his recourse is to that district, not to a GMA, because a GMA isn't an entity.
Correct.
Or another district.
Yeah, and since we're on that subject, one of the features I had in the proposed work was it was a flat fee approach. And so the flat fee included a flat $3,000 for a meeting. Well, obviously I'm not going to charge you $3,000 to get on the internet. So I'll make an adjustment to that to reflect that this was a virtual meeting, not a travel to La Mesa meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. Anything else to wrap up action items under number 6 on the agenda?
Do y'all have any feedback on voting thresholds? So referenced on page 3, under chapter 36 as a GMA, you have a voting threshold of 2/3. So do you want 2/3 as a consistent voting threshold, or would you rather have a lower threshold for other items such as budget, hiring somebody, things like that? What the reality looks like is if you keep it at 2/3, you need 5 people to pass a vote. If you do majority, you need 4. It's not a big deal, but it is just an option in the drafting.
I'm good with either way. I don't have a preference.
Thank you, ma'am.
I like the 2/3.
I'm good too, and I hope we don't ever have a situation where we don't all agree. That we have to worry about it.
Please let the minutes reflect that Garza County does not have a preference.
We don't have a preference either. I mean, whatever's going to work for us is, as a GMA, is going to work for us.
I agree. It doesn't matter either way.
Okay, thank you all. I know there's some delay in the mute and unmute and so forth. So I'm just going to wait another a few moments here if anyone has final thoughts relating to this matter. Okay, we'll move on to the next agenda item. Any suggestions from our members on future agenda items you would like to address or include?
I don't have anything for future items, but I have a comment about the tag meeting next week, if this is an okay time to say something.
Sure.
Okay, to streamline the video portion of it, we want to be sure that the GMA representatives that are going to speak give the update are ready. So Jason, will you be on the call and available to be unmuted to give that update during that portion of the meeting? If you're not going to be on there, we just need to decide who's going to do it if you won't be on the call.
I would respectfully ask that you provide that.
Okay, that's fine. Or if anyone else wants to talk about it, whichever. If anyone has a burning desire to give the update, you let me know and I will submit your name. Otherwise, I will gladly give one on that. And the other thing is, if you have not registered, be sure you do pre-register for the meeting so that you have the links available. And I'm going to send out a tagged area email in a little bit about that. But that is all I have.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other final remarks or future agenda items?
Jason, real fast, I would like to volunteer us again to host the next meeting since we weren't able to host this one. I've received a lot of hate mail and hate text as far as lunch. So did contact Uber also, but Uber won't deliver out a certain area out of Lubbock, man. So I try for most of the guys to send y'all lunch and send a token of forgiveness from us. So, but we would love to volunteer for the next meeting, and if that's fine with everybody else, we can do it here.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have an objection? Rather than ask for agreement from everyone, does anyone have any thoughts about next meeting? If you want to do it somewhere else, let us know. But otherwise, I'm thankful for your invite, Jacob.
I'm gonna speak out of turn since we are allowing that today, but I believe this would be Miss Lindy's last GMA meeting. Thank you, Lindy, for all your work and with the GMA.
Muted.
Blaine, unmute, let Lindy say something.
Not letting me, she keeps slapping my hand.
Well, it's been fun and I won't be here for the next one. Sorry we couldn't really get together for this one, but anyway, it's been great. And I'm going to be hopefully in Colorado for your next meeting, so.
Good for you.
Yeah. But thank y'all, and I appreciate all the work y'all do, and Lane's going to do a great job.
Well, congratulations on your career.
I'm gonna miss her.
We will too.
We all will.
Relying on all y'all to help me with all this stuff. I'm not very even good at the field work, let alone all this stuff. So I'm gonna rely heavily on everybody on this panel.
Okay, last item would be a motion to adjourn.
So
I'll make-
moved.
Motion by Ronnie,
Second.
second Blaine Marlowe. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Bye.
Is anyone opposed to adjourning? Okay. All right, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all. We will now close the meeting.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Hi, everybody.
Bye.